It's the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. For more on the Seminoles, including Osceola's coverage from veteran Seminole insiders, message boards, Osceola virtual happy hours, and more, go to theosceola.com.
Hello and welcome to the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines podcast, which is presented by Alumni Hall, where you will find officially licensed FSU gear for the entire family. Visit Alumni Hall at alumnihall.com or visit their Tallahassee store location at 1817 Thomasville Road. My name is Pat Burnham. I'm a football writer for the Osceola and host of Seminole Sidelines. Today, I'm joined by the Osceola's managing editor, Bob Ferrante, Osceola's publisher, Jerry Cutts, Osceola recruiting analyst, Charles Fishbein, and Osceola football analyst and former FSU offensive lineman, Mark Salva. Guys, we got a lot to talk about as it pertains to FSU spring game, which took place on Saturday evening in Tallahassee. But before we get started, I want to remind our Osceola subscribers that you can log on to the Osceola and click on the Alumni Hall ad to receive a 20% discount code for online purchases and your membership card to present at the store for in-store purchases. All right, guys. Well, the Seminoles took part in basically what was a two-quarter, and we had about 80-play scrimmages where they went 80-play scrimmage, excuse me. Bob and Jerry, to start with you, just kind of want to get a general overview of what you saw from the beginning of spring. We've been out there for about 7 or 8 practices this spring. Bob, I'll start with you. You and I were at the last practice together. Kind of what is your takeaway from what you've seen from the start of spring to the end of spring practice?
Yeah, the big questions, I think, on offense, obviously, were pass protection, consistency of receivers, and just how was Mackenzie Milton going to look? And over time, I think Mackenzie Milton answered that with his arm in Saturday's spring game, obviously, and the receivers did their job. The storyline all spring had been the inconsistency of those receivers. They had flashed, but not done it day in and day out. They certainly showed it on Saturday on the big stage, so to speak. The offensive line, I think, is still just a huge question mark. It's tough. It's tough with all the injuries. It's tough with Devontae Love-Taylor out and Thomas Schrader out, just to get a good read on how that pass protection is going to be. And on defense, I think we saw what the defensive line can do. Not just counting sacks in a spring scrimmage, but just that Jermaine Johnson can be that kind of alpha dog and kind of set the tone for the group. So there's a lot of positives there. Still a lot of things to work on, but a lot of positives.
Jerry, what about you? What were your thoughts on what you saw early in spring versus what you saw Saturday?
I saw a lot cleaner execution of a game than we've seen in several years throughout the spring. I mean, some of our scrimmages this year were rough. And I think our fans who came to the spring game, and that was the first time they saw this team, they saw a much more polished product than what we have seen throughout the spring. So, for a number of reasons we'll talk about today, I just thought that was the biggest thing. You didn't see a lot of false starts. You saw guys running on and off the field. There seemed to be better execution of what they're trying to do, both offensively and defensively, as Bob said.
Well, Mark, obviously you saw FSU the last time was Duke to finish the season. What kind of growth have you seen from the football team taking away from last season to the spring game?
The thing that kind of stood out to me is something that Jerry kind of touched on. You look at guys and they look like they kind of have a better idea what they're trying to do, where their natural talent can now come out and try to do some things. Now, is the cohesion there? No. I think, going into the spring, the goal obviously is to develop your skill sets individually. And then you like to do it collectively as a group too. But the things that I saw guys lining up quicker. I saw, guys more intentional about where they're trying to go, what they're trying to do. I saw some guys that have a little more confidence. There's one thing, another thing that stood out is those two quarterbacks are competitors. Travis, to me, he gets juiced up to be out there in a game situation. And then as it kind of went on a little bit, you saw Milton kind of starting to get his juices flowing a little bit. And you can see the competitive streak in him. I think maybe there was a little uncertainty going in for him, and then defensively, it looked more confident in what they were doing. And that to me was the biggest thing that kind of stuck out, because I think there were times during the year last year where, during the course of the game, guys are looking at each other. Are you here? Are you there? I'm not. What are we supposed to be doing? I think, and we've said it all last fall, you can't understate how important not having spring was in terms of what we saw on the field. And I think we're starting to see the beginnings of it. We're so far ahead of where we were last year, to me. And that's the big picture takeaway for me.
Fish, what about you? What were some of the differences you saw in this team compared to what you saw in the 2020 season?
All the feedback I was getting from the spring early on was it seemed like it was more of the same. So for them to come out and actually look functional and not trip over their own feet was a pleasant surprise. I was nervous about Mackenzie. I'm not going to lie. I wanted them to get him, and we discussed it, but all the reports I was getting that he was struggling, and I really thought Jordan was running away from this. But the one thing is, I remember Steve Spurrier once said about Danny Werfel, in practice he wasn't very good, but when they put him in there and it's a game and the live bullets started flying, he performed at a different level. And it seems like that may be Mackenzie Milton, one of those guys that he plays better in games than practice. You heard all the reports about how great the other quarterback was, Tate, and then he came out and the lights are shining and he struggled. So, you just don't know what these guys are going to really do until they're put in that pressure cooker of, the spring game's a lot more intense and stuff, probably because there's so much going around and the people involved in it. But I thought he looked, you got to come out of this happy that he played to the level he did. Now you have other concerns, but as long as they can keep him upright, at least you have a quarterback that can be competent in both the passing and running game. And that's what he gives you. You saw it. Like, we've talked about this before. Everybody wants to blame the receivers of how bad they are, but a lot of times receivers are only as good as the guy tossing them the football. And a lot of times quarterbacks can make receivers better than they really are a lot of times. And look, a lot of these guys performed at a high level, and I think they stepped up their game because Mackenzie stepped up his game. So from an offensive standpoint, you got to be excited about what Mackenzie brings, because the last couple of years at that position, there's been no stability.
Yeah, and we're fixing to delve into the quarterback, and everybody's going to have a chance to offer their opinions on what they think may happen heading into the Notre Dame game. But certainly going into we had seen a dominant defense in the two scrimmages that we had gone to, and we'd seen really a dominant defense in most of the team periods we have been able to watch in the 7 or 8 practices we were allowed to go to. But the offense, you're right, you have to leave positive. Mackenzie and Jordan both, their first 2 individual drives led their offenses, which is the first team offense, to 10 points apiece, 20 points in first 4 drives. So it was ones versus ones. And so it was very refreshing to see that they came out and got after the defense that had gotten over them over the vast majority of spring. And then, as you guys have said, you saw some things that we knew we'd see. The defensive line had a great day pressuring the quarterback. We had them down for, I believe, 11 sacks in the 2 quarters there. So still plenty to work on, as Bob said. But certainly I did not expect to see the offensive output that we saw in a very abbreviated scrimmage. It was 6 series for the ones versus the 1 defense, and then obviously 6 series for the 2s versus the 2 defense. And of course, as you mentioned, Tate Rodemaker had a chance to get very close to his head coach, Mike Norvell, on Saturday. He did not get a whole lot of help from the second team offense, but certainly as a kid that did not look as sharp as we thought he would based off what we'd seen. Defensively, obviously defensive line, Jermaine Johnson ends up being very strong. I think we saw some improvement, like Mark said, from the entire defense. Coverage seemed to be a little bit tighter. They weren't perfect. They got Mackenzie and Jordan both were very efficient and productive. And then, of course, as Mark said, just more confidence in the way they move. And certainly for me, I was more encouraged leaving the stadium on Saturday night than I was going into the stadium. And so I do think, to Mark's point, you can't discount how important these 15 days worth of spring practice are and we can certainly see the slow but sure development of this program now that they've had those 15 practices. But what everybody wants to talk about, who is going to be QB1? And listen, we've said this, and preferring one over the other is not saying anything negative against the other. We have said coming into this when they signed Mackenzie that Florida State has two warriors at quarterback. We saw, as you mentioned it, Mark, when the lights come on, Jordan is ready to compete. We know Mackenzie is from his time at UCF and coming back from this battle. It's got a chance to be a very interesting offseason concerning the quarterbacks going into fall. But, Jerry, I'm going to let you start. You're the publisher, so we're going to give you the first crack at quarterback. So talk to us a little bit about the quarterback position.
Well, I'm not going to name a starter, and I don't think Mike Norvell should either. I think there's a lot of work to be done between now and August, and you do have two competitors who, let's be honest, probably both of them are going to have to play significant roles this fall.
All right, Mark, you played a lot of college football, coached a lot of college football. What was your takeaway from what you saw from Jordan Travis and Mackenzie Milton?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Where do I start? Look, truth of the matter is we're going to need both these guys. Naming a starter now is not going to do any good. But I will say this. They are two different guys. And it's not like they're interchangeable. When you have one, you're going to have a certain type of offense. When you have the other, you're going to have a certain type of offense. I think that's pretty clear because Milton made 3 throws that Travis can't do that I saw, and, Jordan had some nice completions, but guys were wide open and rolling out of the pocket, hitting, I think was it Mcdonald? The one that was rolling, it was right.
Yeah.
And hitting that throw, that was a really nice play, big play, but that was a broken play, right? He extended the play and he used his legs, which is what he does best. But the throw to 11 down the sideline by Milton and the throw to Burrell, and then the touchdown throw on the out, and there's a couple of the back shoulder throws that Milton did. He did something that I've never seen Travis do, and that's anticipate throws, throw guys open, hit smaller windows, thrown away from defenders. And I haven't seen Jordan Travis ever do that. And the guys have to be kind of wide open. He's got to be on the run, that kind of thing. So, Jordan can be effective doing what he does, and that's running the ball, running the zone read, screens, that kind of thing. Yeah, he can do that. And he can hit a few broken plays and throw a few fade balls. And if he puts them in the right spot, receivers can make a play. But if you're talking about running this offense the way I know it's designed, which is, hit small windows, throw guys open, anticipate throws, I think Milton is definitely the guy that can do that.
Yeah, and I told Jerry yesterday we were talking, and I said I had not seen those, and I mentioned the same 3 throws that you did, that I had not seen those since 2013, possibly 2014. I can't remember who the quarterback was. That was Jameis in 2014, correct? So, yeah, yes. It's been since 2014 since I've seen those type of throws. And you watch that throw to Malik down the sideline in particular. He threw the ball exactly where he wanted to throw the ball and exactly where it had to be thrown. And the same thing with Brian Robinson and, of course, Josh Burrell as well.
Yeah, but anyway, I thought that throw to Burrell was a great throw. And man, yeah, nice touch, anticipated it. He wasn't open when he threw it, but the ball wasn't where he was going to be. And so those are the things that, that's what you want at this level. You want guys that can do that.
Yeah. And listen, again, Jordan certainly, we're not talking about negative about one over the other.
No,
we're talking about what we see. And I think that Jordan has gotten better as a passer, but you talk about the anticipatory style of play that Mackenzie throws with. And that's what we saw. And to go back to someone that mentioned that, he had looked a little rough, and we thought he looked a little rough too, coming into spring, but he had 2 years worth of rust to knock off. And so, I talked to somebody that had been around UCF practices when Mackenzie was there. And I said, well, he didn't look so great. And he goes, well, wait till the lights come on. And that's, and that's kind of what we saw on Saturday. The lights came on, a game type setting. And, he kind of, I thought for the lack of a better, the offense stole the show, but certainly he and Jordan stole the show more than anybody else. Fish or Bob, any takes on the quarterback situation?
Well, I mean, I'll jump in. I really like Jordan. In today's day and age when everybody basically quits once they don't win a starting job, I think this kid's shown a ton of character at Florida State. He could easily have left once they brought Mackenzie in and said, you know what, this is going to be their guy. And I don't think you could discount that. I think he's going to be part of the equation. You have to implement him in the offense. But after what I saw on Saturday, and I was like literally 100% going to give Jordan the job, I really thought Jordan Travis was going to win the job and Mackenzie was going to be one of these guys they were going to have to ease in. But after watching Mackenzie on Saturday, when you throw the ball, you've heard all of the last couple of years how many guys have dropped the ball, the wide receivers struggle. It's a lot easier to catch the ball when the quarterback puts it where the receiver doesn't have to turn and twist and the ball is perfectly thrown and the receiver trusts the ball is going to be there. It's a lot easier to concentrate and bring those balls in. And he does those three passes. It hasn't been since Jameis has been there that those throws have been made. Just the accuracy, the timing, the anticipation. It's hard to sit there and say that's not the guy you're going to go with when, the strength of the team is probably going to be more of Milton in the passing game from what I saw the other day. I think they're going to struggle running the ball. I think they'll get yards, but I don't see as many I don't think they're going to have a bunch of big plays in the run game. And the only way they're going to have big plays in the run game is probably more when Jordan goes in there and they have packages set up for him. But I think they're going to be easier to defend against the run than the pass, just because Milton can basically open up the whole field with his arm. That's just my opinion. But
Bob, what's your thoughts on the quarterback battle heading into the summer?
I think Mackenzie's the front runner. I wouldn't name him the starter. I think Norvell's making a smart move in not naming a starting quarterback this early. I do think, to Fish's point, you have to find a role for Jordan Travis where he's valuable. He's a playmaker. Do you play two quarterbacks in some formation? Do you have him lined up alongside Mackenzie Milton? Do you have him in a wildcat without Mackenzie? Be extremely creative. You've got all off season. I'm not saying I know the right answer. I just think the right answer includes some combination of two quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And, I wonder if Coach Norvell is going to give Coach Bowden a call to talk about how he handled Jimmy Jordan and Wally Woodham and Casey Weldon and Brad Johnson. And, Florida State's had some really good football teams rotating quarterbacks in and out of a lineup. So we could see something similar next year. Certainly, you got two guys that are basically the heartbeat of the offense playing the same position. We know that, Jordan was the heart and soul of this team last year. And of course, Mackenzie is definitely going to have the respect of his new teammates simply because of what he's done. But I agree with what you said, Bob. I think it'll ultimately be Mackenzie. But let's let this thing play out. You got two fiery competitors that will bring their best to Saturdays in the fall. You mentioned it, Fish, that you thought that Florida State may be a stronger passing team in 2021 than it was in 2020, where it had most of the success offensively on the ground. And a lot of that was because of Jordan Travis's legs and the fact that defenses had to account for an additional running back and kind of evens up things against the defense. The offense struggled to run the ball. Some of it was because of sack yardage, but they ran the ball 42 times, first and second team on Saturday for 84 yards. But talk to us a little bit about what you see from the running backs, Josh Coburn, Lars Tuafili, Treyshawn Ward, and, of course, DJ Williams from Auburn.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to, I think DJ, I got to say I was a little disappointed in him. I thought I don't know if he just is hurt. He didn't seem like he was running hard. And he's a big back. I don't expect the big runs from him. I expect him to move the chains and pick up consistently 4 or 5 yards. But he seemed to not be himself. Tuafili is what he is. I mean, he's the type of guy that's going to have a 40, 50-yard run, and then he's going to have a lot of 2 and 3 yard runs. And his big runs are going to skew his overall average, and that's why he has a big average. I don't think he's an every down back. I think Corbin and Treyshawn will be more of those guys that get more of the carries, and then they'll bring in, Toafili to kind of just give them that big spark, bring them in for some of the passing attack, because the other guys I just think consistently are going to give them what Norvell wants. Norvell wants, I think right now, if he could get 4 yards consistently on first down and keep the offense in front of the chains, and he could mix it up on second and third down because they're in plus territory with the first down marker. I think that's what he will want, and that's the whole thing. I think that's why the fans, they see one big play from Toafili and everybody's like, oh, he's the best back. But if you watch them, he's not the most consistent. I think Corbin and the Treyshawn Ward kid will be the guys that kind of get in there and get more of those carries, kind of like LaDainian Webb last year.
Yeah, and of course, and I'm going to let Bob kind of talk about this because we both have seen this in Toafili. He's kind of a guy that you can also use as a slot receiver. Yep. So he, when you're not using him at running back, you can use him at slot, and that you've got one of your, and he's obviously has proven himself over the course of the last year and a half, or I guess he's been here not 12 months, not quite 12 months yet, but he's proven that he's one of your most reliable receivers. So Bob, talk a little bit about Toafili.
Yeah, I know you've compared him favorably to Amp Lee. I mean, there's a guy who can really move well without the ball. He looks like a receiver when he's out there, moves well, catches very consistently. Honestly, for most of the spring, I thought Florida State's best receivers were Jashaun Corbin and Lawrence Toafili. They were just very, very consistent. You didn't see drops from those guys. Agree with Fish's point on Toafili. He's not your number one prototype type of back. But I think there's some complementary pieces there when you blend in a little bit of Corbin, a little bit of Toafili. I think you kind of get that right mix. I know a lot of Florida State fans are saying, well, there's not a Dalvin Cook, and there's not a Cam Akers, but you have to feel pretty good about the pieces that you do have as far as, just being the right pieces within this offense that Norvell wants to run.
Yeah, and besides the comeback from Mackenzie Milton, which his comeback is phenomenal, one of the feel-good stories of the spring from Florida State has been that of running back Treyshawn Ward, who started his career at Florida State as a walk-on, was placed on scholarship to start this semester and had some legitimate offers where he could have signed, but he chose to walk on at Florida State. And, those are fun stories to see. He has been highly productive, even in the game that in every practice we've been to, he has stood out. Jerry, just talk to us a little bit about what you've seen from Ward and kind of how neat these stories are to watch. You've been around this program a long time. You've seen a lot of guys earn scholarships.
Yeah, it's a good story. And he got to play in the Sun Bowl, right?
Yep.
So put up some numbers there. So it's really good to see that happening. I'm with you guys. I think that what Mike Norvell wants is he wants a little bit of a downhill running game. And I think Corbin and he give you that. Toafili's, you all compare him to Amp, and of course, Amp is special, and we all know that. We all recognize it. It's a little bit of a style similarity, but not one of our running backs have that top end speed. Now, Amp didn't either. If Amp got out there, he probably wasn't going to take it to the house. But that's what I see in Toafili. He'll get out in space and make some people miss, but he hasn't shown me that he's got that extra gear, nor has any of the other running backs. So I do think what I like about Corbin the best is that he gets his shoulders north and south, and that's why he's dependable on first down at getting you 4 yards. And they're all of them have shown to be good receivers, which is unusual.
Yeah, and when I compare Toafili to Amp, it's in the fact that they're slippery. They're definitely not similar in size, but the way they kind of snake through defenses. Mark, you're shaking your head. What did I say wrong?
I mean, come on. Ampley is a top 5-7 running back in our program ever. I mean,
I'm talking about the ability to fluid hips and make people miss. Not speed, not size.
I mean, for me personally, I go, work, Dalvin, work done. You're talking the amps right up there, Sammy, Dexter. I mean, come on. Look, we got a bunch of good guys. Are they above average? Are they Division I level backs? Yes. Okay. And that's what we got. They all bring a little something different to the table. But none of these guys is going to win the Miami game, on a 30-yard run, making the guy missing the hole, breaking it to the outside, outrunning the defense to the corner. All right. That's not what we got. And that's okay. That's why I think, to the previous point about Jordan Travis, is he is that guy. He is a guy who can do that. And he's proven that in game situations. And you find a way to get him in that situation, whether it's in the backfield or wherever you line him up, because he's a guy that can do that. Now, can you put him at running back and give it to him 30 times a game? Of course not. That's not him, But he is the guy that can make that game-breaking play. And from what I see from the running backs, I don't see that guy. And that's okay. We can forget it other places.
Well, the dilemma they have is I think they've got two quarterbacks that both need to be on the field at the same time. How do they do that? I mean, we've talked about the fact that Jordan Travis is by far the most dynamic playmaker you have on your team as far as offense with the ball in his hands. And then, of course, I don't think there's any – as we've kind of
here's the other thing, too. Here's the other thing, too, is none of these running backs have had the chance – to be the guy and show that they can do that either. If we do get a chance where we can, some guy emerges, maybe over the summer through workouts and through fall camp, somebody can emerge and say, I'm the guy, and grab hold of it and be that guy. But I don't know that I see the potential for that guy to emerge is I think is where we're at. I don't know what you think.
No. Well, it will be. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah. I wanted to ask Mark, how much, and Pat, both of you, we've all watched what we have. And in terms of pass pro, do certain of the running backs stand out to you, Mark, over the others? Because that's going to be 60% of this offense.
Yeah. I seem to, in my mind, see Corbin sticking his nose in there pretty good. I don't know that I've seen Toafili do it. I don't know that he's been asked to do it. So that's the one that really kind of sticks out to me. And that might just be one or two plays that I'm thinking of,
Right.
Yeah. And they have worked on it. Yeah. But from what we saw, Corbin, he's the bigger of the four backs really. And he's had more success in the individual drills we've seen in pass pro pickup, blitz pickup against the linebackers. One position that we were impressed with coming out of the spring game that maybe we had some reluctance going in, and what we'd see was that of the wide receivers. And Bob, kind of tell us a little bit about what you saw over the course of the spring and through the spring game at wide receiver.
Pat, I think we left that Thursday practice feeling, pretty down about the receivers, what we had seen from the start of spring through then. And then on Saturday, they left you with a really positive impression. I think it just kind of reflects the overall youth and inconsistency there. It's kind of it's a body of work that's really it's going to leave you kind of losing sleep, I think, throughout the summer, because you see a lot of talent. You see a lot of 6'2" and 6'3" and 200+ pound bodies that you fall in love with the frame, but you worry about, is that frame going to run the right route? Is it going to run the right route depth? Is it actually going to catch the ball? This spring was just marred by too many drops that we just saw. Too much offense just wasn't, you couldn't get much done in these practices and scrimmages. And it was not evident at all really on Saturday in the spring game, which I think is a very positive impression for everybody to be left with. I just feel like you've got young guys who are developing, but you question, are those the young guys that you're going to roll out there and either start or have them in significant roles in the fall? You just have to see what develops in August, I presume.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that Josh Burrell and Malik McLean made the most of their chances as early enrollees. They have come in here and, they've certainly made themselves a part of the battle to start next season, if nothing else. And obviously, Keyshawn got some reps and got some chances with the ball in his hands on Saturday, as did Ontario Wilson. And I don't remember. I think Jakai might have got a handoff. I don't know if he actually caught a pass or not. But, certainly impressed with the younger guys, the way they developed. Jerry, you were at several practices and then at the spring game. Offer your thoughts on receivers, please, sir.
Yeah, I thought I was very worried about the receivers, as all fans were going into the spring. And I had almost written off Ontario. And as the spring evolved, he and Helton, kind of became, in my mind, the most consistent. I felt like, of course, you guys know I like Brian Robinson. Yep. He caught my eye early, and I'm still high on him. Didn't know what to expect out of McLean and Burrell, but right away you could tell they were in the hunt. Poitier made some, he flashed at times to me. And I remember going into the spring game, having a conversation with someone, thinking, who are the top four, that I would want my quarterbacks working with this summer? And I thought, it would be Ontario, Helton, McLean, Robinson, and the fifth might be Burrell. But boy, in the spring game, Burrell showed that catch he made down about the 5-yard line was a significant catch in traffic. And that's awful good to see from a kid that hasn't gone to his high school prom yet.
That's true. That's true. Well, it certainly will be an important offseason for the receivers. Moving on to the tight end, Cameron Mcdonald had a good showing for the spring game. I don't think there's a lot of depth there right now. Without Jordan Wilson, you got Wyatt Rector, you got Carter Bright, you got Phillip Daniels. Jackson West did not take part in the spring game or the last couple of days of spring practice. I think he will be a factor, but certainly I think one of the key components to the offseason will be finding who else can complement Cameron Mcdonald as a tight end. Not only, we're thinking with Jordan at 6'2", 262, he could help with the power running game we've talked about that we think Mike wants to establish, that downhill running game. They really have not had a tight end this spring that stepped up in that tight end H-back lead block role. They did some pulling. We saw some counter action with the tight end pulling with the tackle or the guard, and we did say Wyatt Rector using that way, but certainly Wyatt Rector is not quite the as big or as strong or experienced as Jordan Wilson, but certainly that will be a crucial offseason or for the tight ends. And of course, Jackson West will, as an early enrollee, will have his first summer worth of off season. You would think that he would come back a little bit stronger. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there. Mark, we're going to move to your area of specialty, the offensive line. What we saw all spring was what we saw in the spring game, an offensive line. Now, to be forthright, DLT, Devontae Love-Taylor, has not practiced all spring due to his injury suffered late last year. He's certainly your best offensive lineman based off what we saw last year. Out without Thomas Schrader, who was showing promise early in the spring, who's been out with a leg injury since about day 3 or 4 of practice. Then you got Brady Scott and Chaz Neal, who are 4 of your top 10 did not participate, or 2 of your top 10 did not participate. I believe we had 11 sacks, first and second team, consistent with what we've seen all spring, where they have given up just you can't. It's hard to count that high sometimes. Tell us a little bit about what you saw, both run the game and pass game.
Well, I'm sitting here. I have it running right now as we talk, and I'm sitting here watching it, and you're right. We didn't have our full complement of guys, and you're got guys in, got guys out, and I don't have to sit here and wax poetically about how you have to have continuity and how offensive line got to work together and all that stuff. That is all true. I will say this: I think they pretty much picked up where they kind of left off last year. You see him making strides, you see him doing good things. Again, I'll go back to my opening comments about just overall confidence of where they're going and what they're doing. They looked a lot more confident as I sit here and watch it. We got guys covered up. I mean, honestly, looks like they did some really good things. The first team offensive line. I think that it's a little it's a little disingenuous to say, well, we had 11 sacks. You had a quick whistle back there, and it was 2-hand touch on those guys most of the time. So, some of that stuff wouldn't have happened. And to me, they looked where they were last year. They're picking up where they were. I think we're going to be fine there. Once we get everybody together, we get a full fall camp behind us, and we settle on a 5-7 guys. I think they're going to be pretty good. And that's just where I am. And I know that's probably not a very popular opinion, but I'm just telling you, that's kind of where I see it.
Yeah, and listen, we were just they blow the whistle. I just report what happened after they blew it.
Yeah. I mean,
they had 11 sacks.
I'm sitting there watching Bavion. I don't think Bavion hadn't practiced very much, right? Am I correct in that?
Yeah, he's been limited.
Yeah, he's been limited. Well, he looks like it. He looks like it a little bit. So he's not full speed.
But I remember one play. I'd have to go back, but there was a play where I believe Lucas pulled, and he had a combo block with one of the guys and came out, and he kicked out, and it shot Toa Philly for about a 20-yard gain. So
on Madison in beautiful college.
I don't know what that is. So.
Jerry.
Jerry.
Start over. Sorry.
You're good. We don't have to start over. It's a podcast.
That's all right. I'm just saying I saw a play where they kicked out and made Toa Philly get a nice run. But, the line is the sacks are meaningless in this game when basically first off, we talked about it before with Jordan. Jordan can't run, so you're taking away a strength of his. And how many of those sacks, honestly, with him in there, are those going to be sacks? Maybe one, maybe two. It's like
exactly.
I don't believe this defensive line all of a sudden became the Minnesota Vikings of Jerry Kramer and those guys, the fierce purple people eaters or whatever. But
that's all I'm saying. People are ragging these guys, and I'm sitting here watching it. I'm going, they're covering guys up. I'm seeing good, strong inside hands on Jermaine. Is it Johnson, right? 11.
Yeah.
Robert Scott did pretty good. I mean, they're doing an okay job on him. Yeah, the guy's dynamic. He's getting the backfield a little bit, but they're not doing a bad job. I'm sitting there watching it right now. I'm looking at it. I'm like going, these guys, they're not world beaters, but they're not bad, man. They're pretty good.
I think at the end of the day, and it's going to happen down the road, is Darius will probably end up moving inside a guard at some point of his career at Florida State once FSU has true natural tackles, guys that have size and length. So I think if you took their best players and put them at guard and center, they'd be fine outside. It's just, we've talked about it, and every team's looking for tackles. I mean, I was talking to somebody that covers, the Gators, and he was saying the same thing. They're looking for tackles. Miami's tackles have struggled. A lot of teams are looking for those guys, but you build the whole line inside out, and I think the strength is inside, and those guys are getting better than they were the year before. Robert Scott, I think, is going to be very good, but he's even a guy who would have expected him to play as a freshman last year.
Nobody.
Yeah, so, I mean, these guys aren't like ready-made linemen that they're bringing in, and if you're forced to play them as freshmen, you're going to have a lot of up and downs. I don't care. That's why when people bring, even the receivers you were talking about before, yeah, they had a good day the other day, but what happens when the other team's bringing a blitz? Are they going to be on the same page with the quarterback? Or are they going to be running the wrong route? So there's so much that goes into it. Listen, if they could get a somewhat of a running game, we talked about it before, get a somewhat of a running game, stay in front of the sticks, keep the team out of long distance situations, the offensive line will get a lot better. They just can't put these guys in 2nd and 15, 3rd and 20 and expect to be successful, because I don't care if you have Mark out there at his prime. It's going to be the same thing. It's just, that's the way it is. I mean, I just think the O-line honestly gets unfairly bashed a lot more times and a lot of the fans think, oh, well, one guy missed a block, the whole line sucks. It's not that case. It could be so many things that go into that guy missing that block. Maybe somebody else made a mistake.
Yeah, and no doubt I'm not going to argue that. Sometimes the quarterback holds on to the ball too long. Sometimes running back misses a block. Sometimes a teammate that's supposed to help you out goes the wrong way. I saw a little bit of that the other day. So there's no doubt that happens. But what we did not see, in my opinion, was the type of improvement from 2020 to 2021 spring that you wanted to see at spring ball, regardless of whether there was 11 official sacks or not. There's still a long way to go for this offensive line unit to be proficient and excellent in pass protection based off what we've seen this spring. And
here's what I predict. I predict that once fall camp starts and we settle on who the guys are, I predict that they are going to be really good. I think there's talent there. I think these guys are coached well. And I think once they settle in and start molding together and weaving together as a unit, I think they're going to be the strongest unit on the team. That's what
I agree. They're the least of my concerns on this football team. And you couldn't have said that 3 years ago. I honestly, going into the season, I feel their O-line will be one of the most improved units in the ACC. And they're my least of my concerns. I'm more concerned that they don't have playmakers on offense and they don't have a lot of guys that could just light up a scoreboard, because in this day and age, you could have all the great play calling, all the schemes. If you don't have guys that can light that scoreboard up, because you know how it is now, you got to score a lot of points. You could have a great defense. Look at Alabama. If you can't score and score quickly, you put yourself at a disadvantage. And that goes across the board.
And I do not disagree with you guys that they're well coached and all of that. I don't. I do think they will be improved. I'm not ready to go out on the limb that says they're going to be the most improved and most efficient position group on the team. I'm not ready to go there yet. But I do think they'll be better than they were last year. And we'll get into the totality of the team being better too as we get through, move through this. But certainly, yes, I mean, that was the one thing that I would have liked to see. All I'm saying is it was one thing I would like to see more improvement on was pass protection, particularly if you're going to throw the ball more in 2021, which is what 2 of the 3 of you guys have just said. So I'm just looking at what I saw during the spring. But we're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor, Alumni Hall, and then we're going to come back and talk about the defense. We'll be right back.
Alumni Hall, where you'll find officially licensed FSU gear for the entire family, including brands like Nike and Champion, plus great gifts for your favorite Seminole and home decor too. Miss some of the old Seminole throwback logos? Check out our College Vault collection. Shop online at alumnihall.com and let our great customer sales team ship to you within days, or pick up in store in Tallahassee. You'll find us in the Miracle Plaza Shopping Center on Thomasville Road. Students and military get 10% off in store, and Osceola subscribers get 20% off in store and online with their digital membership cards. Alumni Hall.
And welcome back to the Osceola Seminole Sidelines podcast presented by Alumni Hall. Guys, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, most of the fanfare surrounding the defense this spring has been the addition of UGA transfer, Georgia transfer, Jermaine Johnson, and he has certainly looked every bit that part. Bob, I'm going to start with you on the defensive front. There were some other standout performances in the spring games. Dennis Briggs, Jarrett McClendon, and even Malcolm Ray ended up with a pair of sacks, officially or unofficially, depending on who's counting. But listen, talk to us a little bit about what you've seen from the defensive front.
Jermaine Johnson was as advertised. I think he's the guy that is really going to just set the tone for this group. I think he can be a guy who you won't look to for 10 sacks, but you'll look to him to be the guy who consistently puts pressure on the quarterback and forces throws out earlier than expected. That's going to make some mistakes and potentially get you some turnovers. He's been a real positive. I like the depth that's developing on the defensive line. I think Briggs has had a really good spring. Fabian Lovett showed that he moved incredibly well. I mean, in the spring game, Fabian ranged on Toafili on a short little pass over the flat. And I thought, well, that's a defensive tackle moving pretty darn well. And not trying to, rip on Robert Cooper, but you just see a difference in movement of certain defensive tackles in some regards, So I think you see enough building blocks between what Johnson brings you and what you've got returning as far as veterans in that group.
Yeah, and I agree with it. Jermaine Johnson has been everything that we thought he would be coming in. He's definitely the cowbell of the defense. He seems to be the guy that everybody kind of gravitates towards. He had a very strong first quarter. They pulled him and they kind of rested him up the rest of the spring game, which is what you wanted to see. And then, of course, somebody that I've been high on since we saw him as a freshman was Dennis Briggs. He was credited with 3 sacks, and obviously Derek McClendon looked strong too. But going back to your point on Fabian, he really stood out early in spring and showed that consistency all the way through. Jerry, you've obviously been to some practices as well. What were your thoughts on the defensive front?
Yeah, I'd echo what you guys said. I think Johnson is a very good player. I think Lovett is a good player. Briggs, I think, is coming on. We've seen a little bit of McClendon over there, the other defensive end. But my bigger concern, if we're going to talk about concerns, would be depth. The freshman Farmer came in, and we liked him in the practices we saw early before he got hurt. And then, of course, Robert Cooper, as Bob said, really, I think, a good short yardage guy. I'm not so sure about in the middle of the field. I mean, I think Lovett and Briggs are a little more productive there. But, those are my observations. That's my position of greatest concern, probably.
Well, and you'll get Leonard Warner back in the fall. You'll get Keir Thomas back in the fall. Both of those defensive ends should, those are basically your 2 top defensive ends that's a weak side position. Now, obviously, you got Derek McClendon over there now with them, and he'll for sure factor into what happens there. But certainly, you will get some added depth from that perspective. And then, of course, Jarrett Jackson flashed a little bit towards the end of spring. He had not practiced very much all spring. And then, of course, to your point, Joshua Farmer, he's a kid that's very impressive. He's an early enrollee, just like Malik McClain and Josh Burrell. And he's a guy that I think is going to help this football team next year from a depth perspective. But Mark or Fish, y'all have any observations on the defensive line from what you saw at the spring game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much like Jerry. I have major concerns with the depth, and it's just outside of number 11, I felt like most of the guys seemed small, but that's just my opinion. They looked undersized, and I didn't see a whole lot of depth. This team, for them to get to what I think they need to get to is 7 wins this year, they've got to stay extremely healthy and keep their fingers crossed. They cannot afford 1 or 2 injuries on that defensive front. They just, defensive backfield, they got a ton of guys that are really talented. They got depth on that side of the ball, but that front needs to stay extremely healthy. They can't have a guy out for more than a game for them to win, to get to 7. Because if you look at Robert Cooper, Briggs, number 11, after that, you're starting to talk about guys that you're counting on guys that really have never done a whole lot in college to come in and fill those voids. And you don't want that. You want those guys to have to come in and provide some minutes, almost like some depth there. But that's my biggest concern, like Jerry said, is that up front, the depth on the D-line.
Well, they're going to have to develop some depth because today's offense has moved so fast. You're not going to be able to play just 4 guys. So they're going to have to figure that out for sure. Now, moving to my biggest position of concern, and it's Jerry's favorite position group, is the FSU linebackers, which is still hard to believe that we're saying this. But, that being said, they were without Emmett Rice, who was one of your top 2 linebackers. He's been out most of spring with an injury, and hopefully will return in the fall to compete with Steven Dix for the middle linebacker spot. And then, of course, you've moved Amari in, even though it's will linebacker, he's inside in a 4-2-5, and he becomes, and at times becomes, a middle linebacker depending on the formation when they have to kick the Mike out to cover a slot receiver, particularly in 3 trips settings or trips formations, or when they've got doubles or empty. But Jerry, talk a little bit about the linebacker group and what your expectations are and what you saw this spring.
Well, the biggest concern is bodies. We just, there's really 3 guys stand out that are getting the reps.
Yep.
You only have 3 players really they're playing some others like Javion McCluster but so far what we've seen has been Gaynor, Dix, and Deloach, with Rice being out, and very questionable whether he's going to be available in the fall. So it's just you don't have bodies, and we haven't had them at that position in years. And so, yes, we cannot get hurt at that position. I think Gaynor playing in there is more by necessity than by design. Now, one thing to keep in mind is they're using Jamie Robinson on certain possessions in the box as a nickel corner safety, I guess is what he is.
Yeah, he's kind of that hybrid kid. And he did look good. He looked good at times. He did look good.
Yeah,
playing.
He sure did.
He made some nice tackles.
I have to remind myself of that. The guys like him and Brendan Gant and some of our other bigger safeties, we had success with that in the past, walking those from really well. And like Fish said, they're just going to have to be lucky because you're just so thin. Hopefully some freshmen can come in and play there.
Well, they've only got one coming in, and that's it. So it's you kind of got what you got. And he is a outside linebacker. He is not a Mike. So short of the transfer portal, you are what you are at linebacker. Like to your point, there's going to have to be some critical development this summer, and it may happen. I mean, we've seen Steven Dix slowly but surely. Looks like he's improving. So, this summer is critical for everybody, but particularly for this linebacker group. Mark go ahead.
But Pat, let me just say, I don't want to diss on the starters. I think they will develop. They're young. I think DJ Lundy can develop. It's just there's not a lot of bodies there, and that's the fear. At a position
and I think
like linebacker, which is so physical.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons they went to the 4-2-5. They almost forced their hand, in addition to obviously the spread offense kind of helping that make that transition easier because you're getting extra speed on the field with an extra DB on the field. But Mark or Fish, any thoughts on the linebackers?
I didn't really focus on the linebackers. I know there was one play where I saw like Deloach one-on-one with a guy to be able to tackle him, and he put his head down. He missed him badly. It's a position that I've said it's very hard to evaluate now in high school, transitioning to college. Most of these guys are almost like DBs. They either line them up in the slot in high school or they line them up as rush ends. A lot of them just don't know how to play the position anymore, and that's the biggest problem. You have these guys that really don't know how to play downhill. They don't know how to take on blocks. And with the way these offenses are, they're able to take advantage of those positions. My concern is a lot of them don't even get good drops. They don't get deep enough in their drops in the passing game. And I think you're going to see a lot of tight ends have success against FSU because of that linebacker spot.
Mark?
I mean, you guys have pretty much covered it. Look, for me, where we've been most efficient is just in the basics. And I think we got these guys that we have, the starters especially, Dix and Gaynor and Deloach and Lundy, all these, they got the body to do it. They have fairly decent athletic ability. If they're just in the right spot, right, we can be better. It's a small ask, but it's a big ask because we haven't been able to do it in the last 2-3 years. And if we just do that, we'll be better. And I think these guys can do that. They're athletic enough. They got another year under their belt. They've got a whole spring under the system. So, do we have a world beater in there? No. Do we have any NFL players in there? That's TBD, honestly. Gaynor's probably the best candidate to play at the next level. Now is the time for him to show it.
Yeah, and listen, this is still outside of Rice, it's still a very young group. And, at least, and if they're not young, they're inexperienced at this point. So, again, I think it's a position that should only get better as they go through the off season and come into the fall, but certainly a position that I think you've got to be concerned about, like Jerry said. from a number standpoint, which is one of the reasons I believe they went to the 4-2-5. Another group that obviously we had a lot of questions on coming into the spring, but is the defensive back group. They did bring in Brandon Moore and Jamie Robinson and Jarquez McClellan, and then signed Kevin Knowles. And, listen, they gave up a lot of big plays in the scrimmage, but they, to me, seem like they're improving as a group. Their coverage seems to be tighter. Jarvis Brownlee looks like he's going to be a guy that could develop into a true number one, as does Brandon Moore. So you look to be deeper in the secondary heading into the offseason of 2021. Bob, what's kind of some of your takeaways from watching the secondary this spring?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of big question marks for sure. I mean, they were hitting the transfer portal pretty hard for an obvious reason, because you thought you had to have experience and guys who could be almost plug and play. I think we found out Jamie Robinson is plug and play as a nickel. He's a big nickel. And if you've got to go 4-2-5 based on the linebacker numbers, I agree with you guys, what you've said about the linebackers. You've got to have a guy like Jamie Robinson who's going to be a thumper. And I think he can play that role really well. Jarquez McClellan, to be determined what he can do when we see him in August, but we think he can be a really good cover guy to maybe complement a Jarvis Brownlee. So I think we come away with an incomplete portrait of the DBs out of the spring, but some pieces still to kind of be, put together the puzzle in August.
Yeah, Jay, what's your thoughts? You've seen a lot. You watched a lot of the scale, a lot of the quarterbacks during the course of practice. Kind of what's your thoughts on the DBs? We've talked a lot about the corners, but the safeties, Travis, Jay.
Let's look at the body of work for the spring. I mean, these defensive backs pretty much own the offense in most scrimmages. And then we go into the spring game and, Milton throws several dimes, and there was good coverage on those plays. And the offense has a good showing in the spring game. And so now we're questioning the defensive backs again, which is the nature of spring, right?
Right.
So it's just that's human nature. But throughout the spring, I think you guys will agree, the defensive backs held their own. They dominated, actually, the receivers. So what I came out thinking is that Brownlee can play, Moore can play. Like you said, those are corners that we know can play. And then I have started to really like Brandon Gant. And, Jamie Robinson is obviously, like Bob said, he's ready-made, boom, plug and play. And but Gant has caught my eye, and I'm drawing a blank on the name, Knowles, that freshman, that kid.
Yeah, he did not look like a freshman.
No. And remember, I think, Pat, it was you, or maybe it was you, Fish, that said that's what his high school coach told us, that he was going to come in. And
his high school coach told me that he'll be 3 and done. And I was like, are you serious? And his high school coach played at University of Tennessee. He played in the NFL for 10 years. And he was very high of Kevin Knowles. And I was kind of surprised because I've seen him. The kid got a lot better between his junior and senior year. He was a lot better player. He played very well. I'm not concerned about the secondary. I mean, heck, I thought all 3 of those completed passes where Milton made them. I thought the secondary had great coverage. They were great throws. Like, sometimes you have to give kudos to somebody and not bash the other guy. I just think that fans see a guy get beat, and like Akeem Dent, I thought played one of his better games that he's had, even though it was a spring game. I thought he had good coverage a lot of times. He just, Brownlee got beat on a play in the end zone where it was almost like an odd throw to, Jerry's favorite receiver. It's just, listen, those were throws where the DB was there. It was just the throw was better than the coverage.
Oh, listen, I do think that you're right. Mackenzie's throw to 11, you could have a hard time providing better coverage on that particular play. The throw to Robinson in the end zone certainly was the same way. They did get beat deep on the throw to Burrell. You had cover two, and you should never get two safeties beat. And they did both of them got beat. And then, of course, you had if you're going to be real critical, they had the blown coverage, man coverage against Malik for the first touchdown from Jordan. But no, overall, I do think that they are better. There's no doubt about that. I think they have shown improvement. You mentioned Akeem Dent. I think that he did. He looks better than he has before. Kevin Knowles, we heard Adam Fuller rave about Kevin coming into spring practice. That has now been verified. He looks like he's going to be a guy that is going to play a lot of football. And I tell you, a guy that I've really been impressed with over the last part of spring is Sidney Williams, who is pushing Travis Jay for the starting position at one of the safeties. So I can't wait to watch.
Pat, I couldn't remember his name, but that's exactly what I thought when I was trying to remember. Sidney Williams is a player now.
Yeah. And listen, and Jarian looks better than he did in the fall. Yeah. I mean, again, it's everything in spring is kind of speculation.
Everything is, your most recent memory.
That's right.
The difference between linebacker position, the defensive line, and the secondary, as I think Bob said, we got a lot of bodies in the secondary.
Yes.
A ton of bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, but I think the talent level overall is strongest with that group. I think even though we lack bodies in those other two positions, I think the talent level you would say is not up to the same level as probably the secondary. And that's kind of where the concern is.
Yeah. And listen, I do think we all agree that the defense should be better this year than what we saw last year. I agree. They got some talent. We've heard about the talent. Let me ask you guys this question. Now, this is we've gone through every position group. Let me ask you this. And Bob and I, or maybe Jerry and I, had this conversation yesterday. Let's take a look at, where Sidney Williams is developing as a safety, and maybe he beats out Travis Jay. And like you said, you're deep. You got Brendan Gant and Bernardo Green and Jadarius Green McKnight. And you got Shaheem Brown coming. You got Kevin Knowles. If a guy like Travis Jay, as talented as athlete as he is, do you maybe look at him at wide receiver if he does not start on defense next year?
Man, I get him on the field, period. And I mean, defensive line, linebacker somewhere, but no, seriously, at wide receiver, I'd take a strong look at him there. And no doubt.
And they've got more wide receiver help coming. You still got Destin Hill, who's going to enroll in the summer. Then Andrew Parchment, the Kansas transfer, looks like he's going to be a part of the class of this 21 class and come in as a graduate transfer. Now, getting into this, we don't know exactly what the number is at Florida State from a scholarship. We think it's probably 83 or 84. We don't think it's 85. It's obviously not 85 if you're bringing Parchment in as a scholarship player. All right, so let's use Parchment. He's a given. He's coming in at wide receiver. You've got one scholarship to give, Mark Salva. Where are you placing that scholarship on a transfer?
Somewhere on the defensive line.
So you go defensive front.
I go defensive front.
Okay. All right, Fish, where would you put that if you had one scholarship left to give? And this is given the fact that they can find who they think somebody can come in and play right away.
Yeah, I think you get one side of the ball fixed first, and that's offense. If you could get a tackle that could come in and solidify the left side, move Darius inside, I'd take a flyer on a tackle if you could get one.
Bob?
Yeah, I'd agree. If you find the right tackle, go tackle. If not, look at linebacker just because of your numbers where you are.
Yeah,
Jerry?
Of those three, linebacker, defensive line, and offensive line, I'm looking at best available at one of the three.
Yeah, well, if Mark's
that's not
right,
the question.
Offensive,
that's not the question.
He dodged the question. He took the political answer.
I mean, come on.
No, but don't you agree that you're not going to take a tackle just to take a tackle? You're just going to get another guy. You want to find a difference maker. And so,
if you had three difference makers at those positions, which one would you take first?
Probably linebacker because of our depth issues. I'm more comfortable, probably like you, that on the offensive line. I mean, even though we lack bodies on the offensive line too,
we certainly do.
I don't think we let. I mean, are we not? We're not 10 deep, obviously.
No,
but you got 8 to play. You're good. Trust me. I've done that my whole career. You know?
Yeah, you coached it. I mean, you can play with 8, right?
You can play with 8. You know, our defensive line needs an influx of bodies.
Yes.
Period.
Yes.
Because those guys get hurt. They get hurt and they get worn out, and you know, with the offenses the way they are these days, you need as many of those guys as you can get that can play.
Well, I agree. If Mark's right about the offensive line, I'm going linebacker, but I'm skeptical, so I'm going. I want a left tackle. I want a left tackle. That's what I want. I've wanted it for a long time now. So,
would you say you're a spectacle? Is that what you said?
I can be a spectacle at times, but I want a left tackle. I want a left tackle that's not a spectacle. That's what I want. That's what I want. I want a left tackle, but I will take a good middle linebacker in lieu of that. All right, guys. Listen, we're gonna have plenty of time to talk about this between now and August. And if you want to. If you don't want to pin a record to it, I'm fine with that. But what are your expectations? You know, this was a team that, as we all know, won 2 ACC games out of 8. What does improvement mean to you? What does 3 games is improvement, right? But what do you see as where this program is going, and what do you think improvement would mean in 2021? And Mark, I'll start with you.
Great. You know, I have low expectations last year, and I was still disappointed. So let's say, you know, I say 7 games, 7 wins. I think would be, you know, I think it's realistic with this team. I guess. Look, we could play so much better and still lose games. We played bad and lost games by a big margin, right?
Yep.
We can play lots better and still lose those games. So, you know, the degree to which we play better is going to be predicated on we got to have some game breakers emerge on both sides of the ball. And if we do, I think we can win 7 games. If we don't, you know, we're probably a 5-6 win team.
All right, just now, but you do think that you're seeing development and moving forward.
Look, I'm telling you, these 15 days are going to pay huge dividends, especially compared to last year, right? Huge dividends.
Yep. Jerry, what do you think? What's improvement mean to you?
Well, I said it going into spring. My hope was that we could be more competitive in 10 games this year, that we would be competitive, more competitive, and that we find a way to win 7 or 8 of them. And, a lot of that's intangibles, finding a way to win is if the climb that Mike Norville talks about, which is a work in progress, is successful, and you play together as a team and stop beating yourself, you could be competitive in some games that we weren't competitive in last year. Start to believe in yourself. Hey, we came close. We could beat these guys.
Well, I know we were talking yesterday, and you really feel like because of the offseason and because of the spring that Mike Norvell has his pulse on the heartbeat of this team right now.
It appears that way. And, there's everybody you talk to, whether it's the guy running the dorm or it's the equipment manager or the trainer, they all believe that we've turned the corner with buy-in, that the guys flipping the roster last year was huge. That was addition by subtraction. And that the guys who've come in, these freshmen that have come in, Mark, they've kind of come in with the attitude you came in with as a freshman, and that Dion came in with a freshman, and that you bought in from the time you get here. And so that to me is intangibles are important. We've been talking about tangibles up until now. But Mark, and I'm going to tease this because I want to talk to you first before we broach it in this. But I'm looking at it thinking, you got here in '84, And at that time, we were in a hole. You know, our 81, 82, 83 seasons had been disappointments compared to the 80 and 79 era. And we put together back-to-back good recruiting classes in 84 and 85. And all of a sudden, man, you know, magic happened. But at the time you got here, I believe we had some talent at certain positions, but not at others, you know, and we had a lack of depth at some positions. I see a similarity, Mark, as to when you first got here. I'll tease it with you, see if you think that might be good for our next podcast.
I will ponder on that. I will say this: when those classes came in, my class and class behind me with Dion and those guys, when we got good, and we reaped the fruit of that was in 87, is when the defensive line and the offensive line became dominant. Right. Because that enabled those skill guys that we had to do what they do best, right? And so, I mean, it's cliche as it is, until those two position groups become dominant, it's going to be tough.
And so I think you're making my point. In 83, 84, when you came in, it wasn't until 87 that we became dominant. It took a couple of years. It took a few recruiting classes before we came. You grew up. I mean, you had to grow up. And you're in Tomberlin and Kuipers and, you know, Ionati. As you guys grew up, you became dominant. And the same thing with the defensive front. So, you know, think about that for a minute. Maybe next week we'll talk more about it.
All right.
Hey, Fish, what does improvement look like to you in 2021?
You know, you could improve, and it doesn't show up in the wins and losses. And I
agree.
You know, that's the one thing is they could look. They're going to look a lot better on the field, but you know, and I've told I have this argument with people all the time. Coaching and scheme is great, but you know what? When you have the best players or the top players, you're going to win a lot more ball games. And I think there's still a ways to go as far as flipping that roster. And say coaching matters, say it really matters, and it can prove. Like, what is that, 2 or 3 game improvement? So you're talking they're 5-7 or 6-6 if coaching improves you. I mean, coaching ain't going to improve you 5 or 6 games. I mean, talent's going to improve you that much.
Right.
So if you tell me the coaching's better, their scheme better, they get a lot of luck, you're looking at a 6-6 team. And I think that, like, if they get to 6-6, I think that's a major improvement. Now, some people will say, well, you know, they should win 7 or 8. It's not easy to go from 3 to 7 or 8. You got to get there. And once they get to 7 or 8, you'll get better players, and eventually you get to where you want to go. But I mean, like I said, coaching only matters so much. But
you know what, Fish? You know what? There's one position in today's football game, the way it's played these days, that can put you over the top.
Quarterback position. There's no question. Exactly. But if you told me Mackenzie Milton was coming back for the next 2 years, I'd be ecstatic. It's just that he's gonna have his ups and downs. You know, the guy hasn't played in a live game in almost 3 years. As good as he looked the other day, there's going to be moments next year where they play on a defensive line that overwhelms them, and he's going to struggle. It's just it's not his fault. Like, you know, and trust me, I think the O-line's going to be the most improved unit like you do, but this is still a team, like, we feel better because they look better in the spring game, but everybody I spoke to before that spring game was like, oh, this is a 4 or 5 win team. Now all of a sudden they have a great spring game, and it's like, well, we're back to 7 or 8. Listen, this team is what it is. These guys are doing the best with what they have, all right? And they got a lot of holes, and we got to keep our fingers crossed that the best players stay healthy. And Mark, you know that it's a lot of it's luck. I mean, guys get injured on non-contact injuries. I mean, you know, it just you don't.
I think the thing that gives me hope in terms of Milton is the fact that he has done it before. We haven't had a guy on the roster that he could even come close to doing it. But he has. Now, can he do that? Can he get to that level that he was before he got hurt? It's probably long odds that he'll be that good.
I mean, Mark, I told Pat this before he was even in the portal. I told him my number one guy, and he can confirm this, is I said, man, it'd be great if we could steal Mackenzie Milton, because I watched so many UCF games and I know what he's capable of doing. The kid, it's like you saw it again on Saturday. He has some magic in him. He does. He just does. There's some guys that have it, and some. Well, you've been following football forever. I mean, and it doesn't matter how guys throw. Some guys have awkward throwing motion. I mean, Phillip Rivers had one of the ugliest throwing motions, but some guys are just very efficient in the way they play that position. And then we've seen guys, listen, I remember watching J.J. Constantino at the Michigan Bowl practices, and they were playing 7-on-7. The kid looked like the best quarterback on the team. All of a sudden, they put O-line and D-line out there, and this kid couldn't hit like anybody. So it's just crazy. But I think they got a very good quarterback, and I just hope he stays healthy, because you're talking 12 games, and they're going to have to help him out. That O-line's going to have to help him out, and they're going to need a little luck. That's it, So.
Yeah, and I agree with just about everything I've heard here. I do think the program is headed in the right direction, particularly based off what I started covering in 2018. I believe was my first year, maybe 2019 was my first year working back for the Osceola. So I've seen and listen, I agree. I've never, when I said this was going to be a better year, I've never indicated that would be an 8 to 9 win season, which I think is what most people think of when they think of drastic improvement. I agree with you. 6 wins would be drastic improvement. That gets you to a bowl. It gets you another 10 to 15 practices, which this program will need. If they got early enrollees, I think maybe they can practice at the bowl site. I can't remember. But anyway, long story short, I do think that they are headed in the right direction. I do think I think the growth is not going to be as fast as what most people think, but I do think that 6-6 plus or minus a game it would be a great season for Florida State, and show improvement, obviously. But you're right; they're going to have to get some breaks along the way, as all good football teams do. But I do think that they're headed in the right direction, and obviously did leave there on Saturday night a little bit more fired up than I went to the scrimmage with. And we do have to remember to temper our expectations in what we see in a spring game, because you don't see an opponent. All you see is the good things that the team that you're following does. And,
my knee's jerking right now. My knee is jerking as I sit here.
Listen, Pat's in a lot better shape than the text message he sent me the other night. I thought, honestly, man, I'm like, this is the most optimistic person I know. And I'm like, I started drinking after that text message, all right? I'm like, damn. My wife's like, what's wrong? I'm like, damn, Pat's jumping into the lifeboat, man.
Well,
I better have a...
The problem I have, and I told Jerry and Bob this the other day, so, being around the program when I was around the program, you don't ever think of Florida State being a program that would only win 3 games in any season. And so I have to, so what I've started doing, if my eyes see something, that's what my eyes see. I don't try to just see that shiny helmet with that beautiful arrow on it. I try to see what's in it. So
FSU fans have been spoiled for over 40 years. Most teams go through this. Yes, they're one of the fortunate ones that haven't. I mean, listen, Bobby's last year, they won 7 games, and you would have thought, all right, it was a terrible season and everything, but they still beat a good West Virginia team in the bowl game. Like, they dropped, like, you thought that was the furthest they'd ever fall. The last 2 years has just been like a nightmare. So,
it's been, I don't know what you call it, bizarro world, Florida State football style is what it's been. But hey, listen, go back and look what happened to Alabama from Gene Stallings to Nick Saban. Yes, Floribama, baby, Floribama. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, every program goes through it, and we have been spoiled. And the thought of having consecutive losing seasons in 2013 is probably something that never entered the thoughts of anybody associated with Florida State. But that being said, I think we're moving towards better times, and I think Mike Norvell's pushing some really good buttons, not only on the recruiting trail, which I want to talk to you about, but he's also going to win a lot of Florida State fans over with the youth clinics that are going to travel around the state in May, which I think was a stroke of genius. The coaches cannot recruit in May. It's still dead period. And to go out and use that time to build Florida State's brand with the younger generation and allow yourself to get out in front of some boosters, graduates from Florida State, I think was a very unselfish thing for Mike Norvell to do. And these coaches would be stuck inside Moore Athletic Center watching film if they weren't doing it otherwise. And who knows, maybe they see a high school coach or two along the way. But I think it's a smart thing. So, but let's turn our focus to recruiting. It was a huge recruiting, even though it was a dead period for Florida State. They, depending on who you ask, had about 75 to 100 prospects unofficially on campus. They could not have contact with the staff. They did get a commitment from running back Rodney Hill from Bullock Academy in Statesboro, Georgia. But Fish, so just kind of talk a little bit about Rodney. I spoke with him a little bit today, but you've seen more film on him than I have.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was going through all the Georgia kids like last week. I think I sent you guys a list, and he stood out to me. I see that he's a 3-star prospect. I think he's more a legitimate 4-star kid if you're going off of rankings. But you can see Norvell likes versatility in his players. This kid doesn't have to be just a running back. He can line up in the slot. He can line up wide. You can move him around and utilize him. I think he's probably has more upside than Lawrence and can do a lot of the same things as Toafili, but with a little more juice on the back end of his runs. I think Jerry was talking about his top end speed, but I like the pickup. I mean, the one thing about this class, and I was more down on last year, is the floor guys are legitimate players. These aren't just fillers. They're not guys that they're just handing scholarships out to fill the roster up. These are guys that can win jobs and make the team better. Rodney's a very good player. This weekend was very positive for him. I think a lot of people think, you got 75 kids on campus, you're going to end up having more kids commit. But still, at the end of the day, these kids are going to take their time. They weren't official visits. They weren't really able to talk to the coaches. So other than being able to go to the game and see what they saw on the field. And look, a lot of those kids, we've talked about this a million times, especially with Florida kids. Florida kids look at that field and go, man, I can make that team better if I'm out there, And when you have a guy like Travis Hunter, yeah, he's not a Florida kid, but he originally is from Palm Beach. From talking to him, he's leading the way. And you see guys like him, it's going to make it easier for guys to say yes to Florida State, even if they only win 6 games. So these are difference makers. I was excited to see A.J. Duffy get on campus. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's a must-get. I think he's a program changer for Norvell. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. So if Norvell could pull him off and have Nico as the second quarterback, I think they finally turned the corner at that position with those 2 guys. But overall, they got a lot of guys on campus. I like the offensive lineman. I'm a little disappointed that Julian Armella did not show up on campus. I still think he's a must-get for this team. One, he's a legacy. He's a major need position. And you want those guys in your program. When you're a diehard fan or a kid that grew up around a program like this, they're going to try a lot harder, especially in those rivalry games and games that matter. I just think he's a very important recruit. But overall, it was a great weekend for them. They were able to get a lot of kids on campus. One of the first teams to be able to do so this offseason and since COVID hit last year. So I think they're in good shape right now with the 2022 class. So.
Yeah, and I was speaking with Rodney Hill today via text, and he obviously physically gifted, athletically gifted, but he's also one of the smartest running backs I've ever talked to. When I asked him who his favorite player from Florida State was, he said Cam Irving. So he loves offensive linemen. He knows where his bread is buttered.
Yeah,
so
that's a smart kid.
I was expecting to hear him say Dalvin Cook or Warwick Dunn or somebody like. Of course, Warwick Dunn's probably a little outdated for today's generation,
Yeah.
but certainly was not expecting Cam Irving, but he's apparently had some contact with Cam during the recruiting, texting, things of that nature. And so anyway, he was a nice young man to interact with today, and obviously a talented player, but a smart one too. And then, of course, I'm with you on A.J. Duffy. I think that is could be a game changer at quarterback, one of the favorites that I have watched. I'm not going to lie, I've not watched as many as you, but he's certainly a kid that I think can come in. And as I've said before, his sophomore tape from California was as good as any of the quarterbacks they've signed since Mike has been here, whether it's their junior tape or senior tape. And I try to factor out that he looks like Justin Fields in his Ohio State looking uniforms, but try to factor all that out of it. But I know it's probably part of the visual effect of it. But boy, he's a talented kid. But no, it was a big weekend for them. They do have a lot of momentum going in recruiting, and I'm sure they will keep it up. It looks like they're going to be able to start camps hopefully back in June for high school kids. Everyone's kind of anticipating the dead period ending at the end of May, which I know all coaches will be happy of. And then, of course, there's some talk of repealing the Nick Saban rule, which I don't think would go into effect. They won't have an evaluation period in June, so it would have to wait till the next spring. But they are talking about letting the high school head coaches back in the high schools in the spring of, I guess, next year.
What's so crazy about that whole Saban thing, and I remember it happened. It happened in a Miami Northwestern when they had that team with Jacory and all them. And the craziest thing is, he got hammered for it, and they changed the rule. Nick Saban was inside this auditorium, and the kids walked by, and they all said hello, and he just shook his head. He didn't say hello to them, nothing. And one of the local reporters who does a radio show was basically lied and said he was talking to these kids, and I was standing right there. He didn't say a damn word to any of them, and ever since, they haven't allowed college coaches on campus, the head coaches.
Well, and here's the thing, I think the rule was unfair. I think a head coach needs to go out and see these kids in person, talk about fits and bringing in kids that may or may not be problems. I think a head coach can get to know the family that way. But what we used to do when I was coaching at Lincoln High School, what Dave Wilson would do, and we had a lot of great players coming through Lincoln when I was playing there, or coaching there, not playing. I was one that was after I left. But anyway, so what Dave would do is he would have us bring when I coached tight ends, and we had Zach Pillar, who ended up signing at Georgia Tech and then Florida and played for the Titans for a long, long time. When anybody wanted to talk to Zach, he'd have the head coach or the assistant coach walk over to me, and then I had a list of questions that I would ask Zach, where the coach and the player never had to talk. And so there's this whole thing, and whether Nick say, and it's only polite to say hello to somebody when they say hi to you. So I get it. I think they need to go back to do that. There are, listen, coaches are not allowed to supposedly talk to these kids, but there's ways for the high school coaches to ask their kids questions that the college coaches want to know. So there's always going to be some interaction. You're never going to totally limit it. But yeah, I'm with you. I think they need to move away from it. Jerry, I do want to ask you, I want to go back to or Bob even, wanted to ask you guys about the decision to have these youth clinics, and both of you, or even Mark, you're an alumni too. What are your thoughts on that's a little bit different? I mean, Coach Norvell has basically told his staff on a month they were expecting to be home with their families, hey, let's jump on a bus and start touring the state. And, how do you think that will impact how fans feel about Florida State? And it doesn't really offer him a whole lot of advantages in recruiting, although they have offered an 8th grader in Tampa. But what do you guys think about the traveling circus that will be the youth camps going on in the state?
What I would say is that we're seeing a lot of innovations out of Mike Norvell's recruiting operations. I mean, you see this, which we'll talk about in just a second, but you also see that climb, the videotape. It's a 6-part or 7-part video series that he's got Frame developing, which is totally a social media play for high school players to look at and get an inside look at how his program operates. And then third, they just announced it today, and we'll do more on it later. It's going to be huge, but FSU has really taken a bold position on assisting the players with name, image, and license in a release they just put out. So I like everything he's doing as, we questioned that. When we signed him as a head coach, we, Osceola staff, wondered, he doesn't have relationships in Florida, and how effective is he going to be in recruiting? And Fish, you and I talked about that. And, we're beginning to see that he's getting it done. And so this camp thing is just the latest thing. And I think it's really exciting because so many people out there who have children will be able to participate in it. And it won't just be about recruiting for Florida State, but alumni from around the state who have children can put their kids in those camps and get an exposure to what Mike Norvell is. So I think it helps your season ticket sales as much as it does recruiting.
Oh, I think it. Well, I don't think it has very small advantages in recruiting because their eighth graders are younger. I think it's a very unselfish move. I think it's a great move by Mike Norvell and whoever came up with the idea. The one thing I do hope they'll do is, unlike we saw with the previous staff, I hope that their full-time coaches work with the campers, because that's really what the kids want. They want to go home and say that Odell Haggins coached me today, and I hope that we'll see. And I'm sure that's part of the plan, but it's something that I think could benefit this program. You could create decades of new Florida State fans. Bob, any thoughts on the youth camps?
Yeah, I think you bring players, though, too. I mean, if you brought, say, some of the Miami or Fort Lauderdale receivers down there so that they can, mix in with some of the, young elementary and middle school kids, to Jerry's point, it is about, renewing those relationships with moms and dads and young boys and girls. Hey, we had fun out there with Coach Norvell and the players and the assistants. Let's make that drive to Tallahassee. Let's either be a booster or buy some tickets to go to a game. And that's what the program needs is just some juice through the off season. I think that's it's a really positive and creative opportunity that they're doing there with that tour.
And I got an idea, Pat. That's going to be a lot of fun for the coaches too. If he takes his assistants on that road, they'll be bonding and eating dinner together and having a good time.
Oh, I think it'll help bring that staff closer together for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced it firsthand. Miami's been doing it since Mark Rick was there, and now that Manny's there. Manny did it last year. My son went to their camp, and I already know there's like 2 or 3 kids from those camps that he went to that those kids have already been offered by Miami. So it definitely will help in recruiting because they're going to see a lot of these kids at a young age, and the really good ones even stand out at that level. I mean, Marcus Tate was a kid that I saw in the 8th grade, and I knew back then he was going to be really good, and he ended up signing with Clemson. So these guys going to the camps and them getting an early jump start on them, it's never too early in recruiting now. When you're talking,
there's no doubt that they will find some recruits that are 8th graders that are saying, hey, we got to keep an eye on him. But I'm just saying, by and large, it helps you with maybe 2 recruiting classes. Just hard to tell a 5th or 6th grader was going to develop into. I think it's double edged. It can work both ways, but I think it was just and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit, but I just thought it was a neat thing for them to do, given the fact that the coaches were not going to be on the road in May, and he's asking them. It's very unselfish in my opinion. But anyway, well, guys, I know we have spent much longer on this podcast than we had anticipated, and we are entering what is typically the worst part of the year for football fans. Spring practice is over. We have 6 months now to sit around and speculate about what may or may not be for the 2021 Florida State Seminole football team. And, of course, the great thing about being in Tallahassee and around Florida State is that every day is football season. And we will come back with another Seminole Sidelines podcast in the next couple of weeks. But we do want you to remember if you're looking for your officially licensed Florida State gear, to please go to the Osceola, log on to the Osceola, go to the Alumni Hall ad, click on the ad, and receive your 20% discount code for online purchases, and sign up for your membership card to present for your in-store purchases at 1817 Thomasville Road. If you are a Seminole Sidelines listener but not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com, go to the subscription page, and to get a 20% discount, please enter FSU20, FSU20 to get a 20% discount off our annual rate of $74.95. And guys, thank you for joining us. And listeners, thanks for listening. And we will talk to you guys again on our next edition of Seminole Sidelines.
This has been another edition of the Osceola's Seminole Sidelines. To subscribe to the Osceola, go to theosceola.com. Go Knowles!